This week's edition of NJBIA's Minding Your Business is brought to you in part by AT&T, helping family, friends, and neighbors connect in meaningful ways every day. From the first phone call 140 years ago to mobile video streaming today, AT&T innovates to improve lives. New Jersey's community colleges, aligning education to build an innovative workforce. Find out how your business can join and benefit at njpathways.org. And by New Jersey Business Magazine, providing the critical information needs for New Jersey's business community for more than 65 years.
Welcome to NJBIA's Minding Your Business. I'm Bob Considine. Well, our first guest today is known mostly for his 36 years of award-winning journalism, including 12 as the top editor with the Star Ledger and NJ.com. But in 2021, he and his wife, Regina, launched a digital media and strategic communication consulting firm called Whitmer Consulting. And here to discuss how Whitmer Consulting can help your business is the always influential Kevin Whitmer. Kevin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Bob. Great to be here with the BIA and all the things you guys are doing.
Yeah, you know, I mentioned influential in the introduction, and I say that in two ways. One, obviously you were kind of the man behind the curtain producing content for the state's largest newspaper, the state's largest website, which you grew to a massive amount of size, but also influential in the journalism sphere, where I was a former reporter for you at the Ledger. And I know so many reporters and editors who have to thank you for the help you gave them into their career. So thank you for helping me out.
Absolutely. And that was always the best part of the job, is the people. That's why you got up every day and did it.
Yep. So we'll get into Whitmer Consulting, but I did want to ask you, you know, you had this long, just really storied career with the Star Ledger, NJ.com. What was it like to go through that, especially in the more dynamic times where you were having challenges in the industry? What was that like for you?
Absolute challenge of a lifetime, and you know, the most important work I did in my career. And I like to tell people, I basically had two careers, right? I got to the Ledger in '96. Right. For 9 or 10 years, it was the best of times. Yeah. And we traveled, we won every award you can win. Yeah. And that newsroom was full of spectacular, talented people. And in about 2005, we started to see the cliff rapidly approaching.
Yeah. Iceberg right ahead. Right?
Iceberg, and it wasn't moving. Yeah. And we were moving fast. And it was pretty apparent by 2007, 2008, we were either going into the iceberg, going over the cliff, as I like to say. Right. We didn't have seatbelts. We didn't have anything. Yeah. And you know, the reality was we had to change this legacy institution in this legacy industry that really had not evolved for the better part of 150 years. Yeah. You know, and it was how your message was delivered, and the content, you know, was as good as the advertising allowed it to be. And at the Ledger, the advertising machine was incredible. Yeah. And that allowed for great journalism.
Yeah, state largest newspaper, it's funding that. So what you're talking about is a transition of basically from print to digital is basically what we're talking about here.
Exactly. And so we spent the years between 2005 and 2014 sort of right-sizing the organization. There was 2008 when we famously had a buyout that saw 151 of 333 employees leave. Right. And into 2010, another buyout. And then really it was about preparing for 2014 when we basically brought together the staffs of NJ.com and the Star Ledger, and we created NJ Advanced Media, and the company and our owners at Advanced, the Newhouse family, made the right call that digital was the way out. Yep. And it was challenging, and you know, you lost talent and you had to replace talent, and you're launching new products. You know, at the peak at the Ledger, we had 335 people and we had 1 or 2 products. Right. We had a newspaper, we had a magazine. Yep. And then you started a website, and then, you know, you started another magazine, and then you're doing podcasts, and you're doing video shows live in the newsroom. You're doing video documentaries. You're launching social channels. Yep. You're launching niche verticals. So you go from, you know, this deep bench of talented, brilliant people to finding people, you know, maybe a third of many who wanted to go over the side of the mountain with you. And we were really fortunate. We found a lot of great people. We were still able to do great work, work that affected policy, work that saved lives, work that really spoke truth to power in New Jersey, and work that really, you know, on most days, everyone on that team was incredibly proud to do.
Yeah, and I know there's still some folks at the Ledger now that I used to work with even 10 years ago, and they are some Ted Sherman we talked about earlier, Kelly Haybar, he's a really tremendous journalist, Susan Pavkovic, the editor there, so it's good that they've stayed on, you know.
Yes, and look, having that level and that tier of experienced people who've been a part of every story for decades, who then can share that experience with the younger employees, and the younger employees who want to learn, who want to sit next to a Ted Sherman or a Sue Livio when they're, you know, interrogating a source. You know, that's where the master's degree can come in.
Yeah, so. Totally. And was it, I should ask, I mean, was it difficult for you to make that change, to leave?
So I left at the end of 2021, and I don't think it was difficult. I am a big believer in, you know, knowing when it's time. And as a kid, I spent too much time being the last one to leave the party, and I was not going to be the last one to leave the party here.
You started the party too.
I did start this party, I guess. But, you know, for me, I got to a point, age-wise, experience-wise, where I needed to change. And I did journalism for 36 years, and half of those years I worked in sports. And half of those years I worked as either the managing editor or the, you know, the editor-in-chief, lead editor of the organization. So in those 36 years, I had more than enough journalism. And I wanted to try to do one other thing. And this was about the third time I had danced with myself and with Regina talking about this. And it just became apparent toward the end of 2021. It was time. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions I've ever made.
So it wasn't like you could have done anything, but why this? Why media communication, digital media communication strategy?
The last 2 or 3 years I spent at NJ.com, NJ Advanced Media, I spent a lot of time with sales and marketing teams. And, you know, I had the benefit of learning from great people how to talk to clients, how to structure a campaign, what the tools were, And at the same time, from 2014 forward, I realized I was trying to explain digital to people who do what I do now. And no one understood it, And these were great people with great shops, incredible relationships with influencers around the state, but they really weren't clear on what was happening on digital. Not just from the content side, but also on the marketing and the ad targeting, and how to build campaigns where content fed into the advertising initiatives.
And NJ.com just grew. I mean, the whole NJAM we call it, right?
Yeah, NJAM.
It just got so huge.
Yeah.
I mean, you must feel great about that at the end of the day.
So, you know, on our best day at the paper, we were doing 600,000 on Sunday and 400,000 daily, which made us one of the 12 largest papers in the country. At the end of 2021, we were doing 21 million unique visitors a month to NJ.com in a state with 6.5, 7 million adults. So we learned how to talk to the people in New Jersey. We learned how to talk to the people outside of New Jersey. And we learned to talk to this huge group of people who were fascinated by all things New Jersey, And that was a function of popular culture, of TV, of The Sopranos, of The Housewives, of you name it. And there was always this fascination with all things Jersey. And so we're getting smaller, we're cutting back on local news. So strategically, the only play when you don't have bodies to cover the school board meeting or to cover the police department, you have to go toward a really broad strategy of sort of the New Jersey identity. Anybody who grew up here, anybody who lives here, anybody who's fascinated by the state, like, being from Jersey is
Yeah.
special.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's a badge.
It is. There's
you
something
know,
about it that
it's
is.
we're living like
Right.
the world's greatest inside joke.
Yes.
Right? And
I know that feeling.
you know, playing to that identity really helped us, along with, you know, the really big capital J journalism, doing high school sports, and then being able to speak to people on all the different platforms where they were.
All right, so we could spend all day going back memory lane, but I
could.
do want to talk about Whitmer Consulting. I mean, when a business, small, medium, large, comes to you, what are you exactly offering them?
So my sales pitch right away is there's no one like me,
Yeah.
right? And this is where it's good to be the guy with gray hair.
Right.
And a lot of digital, you know, it trends younger. A lot of media, you know, today trends younger. You know, I've got 36 years in this. There's no one in this state still to this day who has spent as much time in real-time audience data as I have to understand what people read, where they read it, and the voices across all the different platforms. Wow. So I bring that experience, and I always come back to the fact that I'm building on all of the, you know, discussions I've had with people who were doing strategic comms.
Yeah.
I was explaining media to them. I was explaining digital targeting to them. I was explaining like geo pins and mobile conquesting and all these things. SEO, right?
Yeah.
That's how we got to 21 million. So being able to sit down with a client and say, look, you know, we can talk about a lot of things, but let me first just do my dive.
Yeah.
And I love to do an audit on clients. I love to see where they are with their website.
Right.
I love to see where they are with their social media. I love to see just the language, right? Like, I mean, we've edited stories back and forth a million times, right? And my big thing as an editor was always like, you would never use that word in a conversation with me. Why is it in your story?
Right.
Like, you would never say, hey, Kevin, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, being able to have a conversation with people, you know, and you know, knowing what their target audience is. You know, I have clients who, you know, are trying to reach an incredibly diverse mix of people and for a lot of different reasons. You have to know the language that they want to speak. You have to know the platforms where to reach them, and you have to know how to shape and target the messages. So that's what's worked really well, is being able to explain that to people.
I feel like your website is really a good living, breathing example of what you do. And I was noticing you have these 9 building blocks of Whitmer Consulting that could help a client with their digital media and marketing. I just wanted to hit on 1 or 2 of them. Improving your content game. Why is that important?
So, look, I think everything in this world is about communication, whether it's sitting here having a conversation or whether it's opening the mail and seeing what the insurance company has sent you. And I have you know, dear friends who work in all varieties of industry.
Right.
And we always talk about the same thing. We talk about how heavy and just thick the writing is.
Yeah.
Right? So again, we start with language and then we go to, all right, well, okay, there's your message, but you know, where are we going to distribute that message? And then I always love to work with clients on what I call the messaging funnel, right? What's your elevator pitch? Give me the elevator pitch in 80 or 90 words. Give me the mission statement and give me what you're putting on a coffee cup. And anytime you get a client talking about any of those, they're long.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And mission statements are my favorite because, you know, they're these like rambling, you know, and they're really well intentioned. But you can't find the noun and the verb.
Yeah.
Right? Like, tell me what you do.
Yep.
And then tell me why you do it or who you do it for.
Yeah.
Right? So as we go forward and sharpen the messaging, like that really sets you up to distribute how you want to reach people and where you want to reach them.
Well said, well said. Grandiose question. I mean, how do you measure success, Kevin? Is it, does it depend, is it a matter of how many hits you get, your engagement, or is it client specific or more nuanced than that?
That's the ultimate question, right? And I think it is client specific. And, you know, when I started this, I thought like, you know, I would have, you know, a couple of the big clients out there and I would be doing strategic consulting and you know, using my relationships with people of influence to help them. And that really hasn't happened. So I've dealt with a lot of smaller and mid-sized businesses.
Right.
And the best part about this is, you know, and we have transactional clients. Everyone has transactional clients, Bob.
Yeah.
The best clients are the ones who want to share. And you know, helping a client realize the potential in what they're trying to do, and then seeing them accomplish it is great. And it's like making the paper every day. You know, it's the daily miracle. and you get finished and you get through a campaign and it's time to do the next one, or it's time to go to the next client. So seeing like that thing unfold for them and watching that reaction and seeing how excited they are to share, that's where the real joy comes from.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, you're off to a great start. I would recommend any small, medium-sized business out there, go to Whitmer Consulting, great website. I also noticed great articles in the newsroom section, and that's probably not an accident. You've had experience with this.
I've written a few things, some of them even under my name over the years.
Right. Kevin, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Bob. I really appreciate it.
We'll be back right after these words.
You're first. First to respond. First to put others' lives before your own. And in an emergency, you need a network that puts you first, that connects you to technology and each other, that's built with and for first responders. FirstNet, the only officially authorized wireless network for first responders. Because putting you first is our job.
Okay, at AT&T, everyone gets our best deals on all smartphones.
Let me break it down. You got your new customers.
They get our best deals.
You got your existing customers.
They also get our best deals.
Everyone
Gets the deals.
questions.
Got it. But why did you use a permanent marker?
Because I want to make sure you remember. I'm going to get a new whiteboard.
It's not complicated. Only AT&T gives everyone our best deals on every smartphone, like the Samsung Galaxy S21 5G for free.
Welcome back to NJBIA's Minding Your Business. I'm Bob Considine. Well, NJBIA's 2023 Regional Business Climate Analysis is now out, and it unfortunately shows New Jersey is last among 7 states in terms of business taxes and cost competitiveness. Here to discuss the analysis is the man who put it together, NJBIA Director of Economic Policy Research, Kyle Sullender. Kyle, thanks for being back on the show.
Thanks for having me, Bob. Good as always.
Great report here. I wanted to just go right into the actual standings here, and then I'll ask you a few questions of it. As we look at it here, we see New Jersey was worst with 11 points, and you go all the way up the ladder to Maryland, which was 34 points, which I believe Maryland was second last year, and Delaware
That's correct.
And Delaware was tied for second with Pennsylvania this year with 31. So I guess the first question I want, Kyle, for the audience is, how did you score this? How do you arrive at these numbers?
Sure. So we've been doing this analysis the same way for a couple of years now. What we look at are 6 different measures of business costs and associated factors in each of these 7 states. And then the goal is really to rank them against the rest of the region. So taking them into the context of their direct competitors.
Right.
So each state then gets a score for each individual metric based on how it ranks against those other 6 states. And so if you're the most competitive in that particular metric, you're going to get 7 points.
Got it.
If you're least competitive, you're going to get 1.
Right.
And then the total scores are just add them all up at the end.
Perfect. I was noticing on, I guess there's 6 metrics, that New Jersey is pretty much either last or second to last in 5 of the 6, I believe. I wanted to start with the corporation business tax, because this is a big topic. As we're taping this today, Governor Murphy is expected to announce in his budget address that there'll be a sunset of a 2.5% surcharge on the CBT. As we look at the data now, before that, we see that New York has the lowest corporate tax rate at 7.25, and you go up the ladder, Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New York, currently 11.5, and that includes the surcharge. So if we get to 9.0, Kyle, how will that impact this ranking looking ahead?
It's unfortunate because this is an area where we constantly talk about New Jersey not only being an outlier regionally, but being an outlier nationally as well. And so those 50-state statistics aren't shown in this analysis.
Sure.
But if you were to look at them, you would find that New Jersey currently has the highest top corporate business tax rate in the entire country.
Right.
So the sunset of the surcharge, which will bring us down from that top rate of about 11.5% back down to 9%, would still have us as the highest in our region.
Right.
And it would still have us somewhere in the top 4 in the country, but it would bring us a lot closer to those regional competitors.
Right.
And so even if the score in the analysis doesn't change immediately, you would see that competitiveness start to narrow, and New Jersey being more in line with the states in our region. And states like Pennsylvania that are actually taking steps to lower their corporate business tax even further than their current rate of 8.99%.
And what track are they on, Pennsylvania, right now?
I believe they are reducing their CBT rate by half a point each year until it reaches 4.99%.
Wow. Yeah, by 2031, I think.
By 2031, they had previously been right up there with New Jersey as one of the highest corporate business tax rates in the country, and they've now taken dramatic steps to get down to one of the lowest.
You know, it's funny. I didn't realize New York was 7.25 on the CBT. I didn't realize it was that low.
There's a lot of variability on some of these metrics. Okay. This is why it's important to gauge these at a regional level. The Northeast is an expensive place to operate regardless of what state you're in. But those marginal differences can have a major impact on where people decide to invest, start, and grow their businesses.
All right, very good. Next metric, Kyle. Property tax paid as a percentage of personal income. As we look down the list, we see again New Jersey is last at 4.8%, New York just ahead of us at 4.36%, and Delaware at the top spot with 1.86%. Can you explain this category?
So this is a measure that comes right from the Tax Foundation's annual business climate report, and it is an attempt to gauge property taxes as they relate to the population in that state. And what I mean by that is you could look at the total number of property taxes paid in a state, but that doesn't really get to those marginal differences.
Right.
In New Jersey's a high-income state. Our median income is much higher than a lot of other states in the country. So you want to account for that difference. And that's why we take that property tax as a percent of personal income. And unfortunately, even when you account for the relatively high incomes in New Jersey, our property taxes are still very high.
That's very interesting metric there. Let's go to the top income tax rate. This one, New Jersey is not last, 10.75%. New York has the worst, I guess you would call it, thus getting the lower score at 10.90. Pennsylvania, a mile away here, 3.07. This is ironic timing in a way, Kyle, because you mentioned the Tax Foundation. They had actually just put out their top national income tax rates. And there, New Jersey was 10.75 for the nation, I think, tied with District of Columbia.
Another space where, unfortunately, we find ourselves being an outlier nationally, not only regionally. And another space where I would continue to harp that some of these actions that could help to improve our competitiveness do not have to be dramatic. You're looking at relatively small numbers that could bring you further in line with competitiveness in other states.
Right. New Jersey does not have like a single rate tax structure, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So do other states do that?
Other states do. Off the top of my head, I believe Pennsylvania does. Other states like New Jersey will tax on a progressive structure. So the more that you make, you'll start to pay a different tax rate on every dollar above a certain amount.
All right, very good, Kyle. Let's go next to maximum UI contribution per employee. Some wide disparity here, Kyle. New Jersey is second to last at $2,122.80. Massachusetts, the worst. I don't know what's going on there. $2,433. Explain what this category is about, Kyle.
Yeah, so this was a new kind of play on a measure that we've used in the past. And so in the past, we've just looked at the top unemployment insurance tax rate.
Right.
But there are a lot of components to this tax. And so what we wanted to do was find a way to bring more of those components into the fold to really get a full comparison on how these taxes are levied against businesses in each of the states. And so when you're looking at the unemployment insurance tax, there's two major components for a business to consider. One is their individual tax rate.
Right.
We look at the maximum rate for the sake of our analysis, but each business is going to have a different rate within the structure. And then there's the taxable wage base. And this is the threshold of the employee's wages that tax would actually get applied to.
I gotcha.
And so really easy to think, if you have a 10% tax rate on $10,000 in wages, the most you would ever pay is $1,000. But you could have a 5% tax rate on 100,000 wages and pay $5,000. So just looking at the rate doesn't really tell us the full story. We have to take into consideration that wage base as well. And that's why you see New Jersey so much higher than some other states. We have a very high taxable wage base in this state. And then there's states like Massachusetts that ranks further down than us, where they have not only a relatively high wage base, but then also a very high maximum tax rate.
Got it. Very interesting. It begs the question for me, NJBIA has kind of been fighting this unemployment insurance tax increase, $1 billion over 3 years. 2 years ago it was like $300 million for employers. Last July 1st, another $300 million. And if things don't change, this July 1st, another $300+ million is going to be assessed to the UI tax for employers. I guess my question, Kyle, is do those numbers impact this metric at all?
They certainly impact the metric. That increase is going to shift the state onto a different schedule so that the actual rates employers pay, that tax rate, can change and increase. And that's going to increase cost to businesses. As far as our analysis is concerned, given where the numbers lie, I don't know that that'll necessarily change New Jersey's rank here, but it certainly has a real impact on businesses in the state.
Absolutely. So it might change the number, won't necessarily change the rank.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. Next, state sales tax plus average local rate. And we see here New Jersey is second to last again, 6.6%. New York is last at 8.52%. Delaware, we know all about Delaware, 0.0000. And then hey, it's pretty close. Once you get Maryland to New Jersey, it's a pretty compressed range there. So what is this metric about?
So obviously, state sales tax rate is a cost to businesses in the fact that it's going to impact the way the consumers interact with them. What we did this year, though, NJBIA constantly trying to find ways to improve our analysis and find ways to make these metrics as all-encompassing as they can. And so for the first time, what we've done is look beyond just the state sales tax rate and incorporate that local average. So it doesn't impact most of the states in our region. New Jersey, you're not really paying local sales taxes when you go around. In most of the states in the region, you do not. But in states like New York and Pennsylvania, counties and municipalities can levy additional sales taxes on top of what the state does. And so in the case of a state like New York, the state sales tax there is only something around 4%.
Okay.
And so if we just look at the state rate, New York looks great. It looks like they're doing a great, they're way ahead of the pack. When you incorporate that local average, which is somewhere around the same, about 4.5%, now what the consumer actually faces at the retail shop is an 8.4 or 0.5% sales tax rate. That changes the competitiveness of New York a lot. From a state policy standpoint, it's still that 4%. But if you're talking about the actual cost to the consumer and how that impacts businesses, you have to take into consideration that local rate as well.
Very good. Way to get into that extra detail. That's very important. Last one, Cobb, minimum wage. This is very interesting. We've heard about this for a long time. New Jersey, this is the only category where New Jersey is not last or second to last, currently at $14.13 per hour. Massachusetts, I just see, is $15 an hour. And I guess, Kyle, Connecticut, they're currently $14 an hour, but you have an asterisk here. Why is that?
They're going to go up to $15 an hour this summer, I believe on June 1st.
Okay. So what happens with this category? If New Jersey is 50, it'll be 15 at the end of this year, correct? January 1st.
Most likely, depending on how that's indexed to inflation.
Okay.
That's why we're at 14.13 this year, so there may be some variability on how the law is applied.
Got it. So is this a situation where some of the states and region are going to be pretty even from a year from now?
It seems that way, and really, they already are pretty close together. When you're talking about the difference between $14, $14.13, $14.20, and $15, certainly there's an impact there. But it's not as dramatic as when you look at the difference between $14 in a state like Pennsylvania, which is still at the federal minimum wage level. As we move forward, I mean, certainly we'll have to consider whether or not this is really still a metric that compares competitiveness in the region. If every state has the same minimum wage level, there's really no reason to compare them. I don't think we're there yet, though. You can see a lot of variability in some of the states, especially the ones that rank towards the top of our index. But it's something we'll be continuing to keep an eye on as we continue to do this analysis year after year.
Well, you've done this year after year for a few years now, so it begs the question, how can New Jersey get off the snide or at least narrow the gap a little bit? How can you save us, Kyle?
I don't know if I can do it single-handedly. The good news is I do think our policymakers are getting the message. I think stakeholders throughout the state are really starting to hear this, and you're hearing more talk from them about affordability issues, both for the resident but also for businesses. I think the governor's pledge of no new taxes in his second term is a great first step, as well as the allowing the CBT surcharge to sunset and to bring that top rate more in line with the rest of the region. Obviously, there's more that we have to do, though. As other states' minimum wages catch up, that may be an opportunity for us to no longer stand out as much as we once did. And there's certainly other opportunities at the margins here like I said before, we don't need dramatic changes in a lot of these spaces to be more competitive.
Yeah.
There are spaces where dramatic changes would be welcome,
sure.
but they may not be necessary to bring us more in line with other states and improve the competitiveness of our state in attracting and nurturing new businesses and entrepreneurs.
All right, well done. Folks, if you want to see the great stuff Kyle puts out, you can go to njbia.org/advocacy/research. Learn it, know it, go to it. Kyle, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
All right, and thank you for joining us on NJBIA's Minding Your Business. We'll see you next time.